Echoes beyond the veil. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the desolate cemetery. It was here, among the silent tombstones, that David Kensington stood, a man tethered to grief, his heart an open wound that refused to heal. The chill of the night mirrored the cold emptiness within him. David, once a man of laughter and light, now moved through life as a mere specter of himself. He had known happiness, and its name was Sarah, his wife, his confidante, his anchor in the storm of existence. The world lost its warmth when Sarah's laughter was silenced forever. As the chilling wind whispered through the branches of ancient oaks, David's eyes remained fixed on a single gravestone. Etched into the cold stone was the name that echoed in the caverns of his soul: Sarah Kensington, a beloved soul lost to the ceaseless march of time. The profound loss of Sarah haunted David's every step, casting a shadow over the fragments of a life that once held promises of joy and shared dreams. His nights were filled with the echoes of her laughter, and his days with the ghostly whisper of her voice. The ache of loneliness became his constant companion, an unwelcome reminder of the void that Sarah's absence had carved into his very being. Fueled by an insatiable yearning, David embarked on a desperate quest, an odyssey into the realms of the unknown. His search was driven by a singular desire, to breach the ethereal boundary that separated the living from the departed. In the labyrinth of his grief, he sought a conduit, a means to speak to the one he had lost. Books on the occult lined his shelves, and sleepless nights were spent poring over ancient manuscripts and whispered incantations. He sought solace in seances and mediums, hoping to catch a fleeting glimpse of Sarah's spirit lingering in the shadows. But the veil between worlds remained impenetrable, leaving David on the shores of an insurmountable chasm. His desperation grew, morphing into a relentless pursuit. In the darkest corners of the internet, he discovered whispers of a cutting-edge technology and invention that claimed to unlock the mysteries of the human mind and bridge the gap between the living and the dead. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with longing, David set forth on a perilous journey into the unknown, driven by a love that refused to surrender to the cruel finality of death. Chapter 2: Discovery of the RAS technology. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth as David navigated the dimly lit alleyways of a nondescript part of the city. His steps echoed in the silence of the night, a rhythmic cadence betraying the urgency pulsating within him. The cryptic whispers of the internet had led him to this clandestine meeting with destiny. In the shadows, he found himself face to face with a figure shrouded in mystery: Dr. Evelyn Hartley, a renegade scientist with an unquenchable thirst for the forbidden. Her eyes gleamed with a mix of brilliance and madness as she unveiled the enigma that would reshape David's reality. In the heart of a hidden laboratory, David beheld the technological marvel that would become both his salvation and his curse: a device that harnessed the power of the reticular activating system, RAS, the very essence of consciousness. Dr. Hartley spoke in hushed tones, describing a bridge between the realms of the living and the deceased, a gateway forged in the crucible of scientific audacity. The RAS technology, a sleek headset adorned with pulsating lights, promised to unlock the dormant potentials of the human mind. It claimed to traverse the veiled corridors of the subconscious, where the echoes of departed souls lingered like whispers in the cosmic wind. For David, it was a lifeline thrown across the abyss of loss, a glimmer of hope in the oppressive darkness that clung to him. Intrigued and desperate, David hesitated only momentarily before succumbing to the gravitational pull of possibility. The headset found its place upon his temples, an unspoken contract binding him to the uncharted territories of the mind. Dr. Hartley, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anticipation and caution, initiated the experiment that would unravel the fabric of David's reality. As the technology hummed to life, David felt a surge of energy coursing through him, a dance of neurons, a communion with the unseen. Visions unfolded like chapters in a spectral narrative, and the boundaries between the tangible and the ethereal began to blur. The room echoed with the hum of the machine, and David, suspended between desperation and wonder, stepped into the uncharted realms of the RAS technology. It was a gamble with destiny, a journey into the unknown that held the promise of communion with the one he had lost. Little did David know that the bridge he crossed would lead him not only to the echoes of the deceased but to the shadows that lurked within the recesses of his own consciousness. The experiment had begun, and the consequences, veiled in uncertainty, awaited their moment to unfurl. Chapter 3: Contacting the Other Side. Within the cocoon of the dimly lit room, David cautiously donned the RAS headset, the pulsating lights casting an ethereal glow on his face. Dr. Hartley monitored the proceedings with a mix of anticipation and trepidation, the air charged with the palpable tension of stepping into the unknown. As the technology synchronized with David's neural pathways, a subtle vibration enveloped him. The room, once a haven of familiarity, transformed into a gateway to uncharted dimensions. With each heartbeat, he ventured further into the recesses of his consciousness, guided by the whispering promises of the RAS technology. At first, the encounters with Sarah felt like a gentle caress of nostalgia, a reunion with a lost love that transcended the boundaries of mortality. The familiar contours of her voice resonated within the confines of his mind, weaving a tapestry of shared memories and whispered endearments. The room became a sanctuary where time stood still, and the ache of separation momentarily waned. David reveled in the comforting illusion, clinging to the semblance of normalcy that the RAS technology bestowed upon him. Together, they strolled through landscapes painted with the hues of cherished moments, their first dance, the laughter that echoed in cozy corners, and the whispered promises exchanged under the moonlit sky. In those fleeting moments, the veil between the living and the deceased seemed to dissipate, and the chasm of loss was momentarily bridged. However, the fragile tapestry of comfort began to unravel as the encounters took a disquieting turn. The familiar warmth of Sarah's presence metamorphosed into an unsettling chill. The once clear visions now distorted into surreal landscapes, where shadows danced with malicious glee. Cryptic messages whispered through the corridors of his mind, leaving behind a trail of enigmatic riddles that clawed at the edges of his sanity. The room, once suffused with a comforting glow, became a theater of unsettling revelations. Sarah's visage, once serene, twisted into expressions of anguish that mirrored the depths of the unknown. Unseen hands seemed to reach out from the spectral realm, attempting to pull David further into the abyss. In the midst of these disquieting encounters, David grappled with a maelstrom of emotions: longing, fear, and a gnawing suspicion that the technology that promised communion was, in fact, a conduit to something far more malevolent. The line between the comforting illusion and the chilling reality became increasingly blurred, and David stood at the precipice of a descent into the shadows that lurked within the interstice of the living and the deceased. The RAS technology had become a double-edged sword, and the echoes from the other side carried with them the weight of a haunting revelation. Chapter 4: Unraveling the Mystery. The RAS technology, once a beacon of hope, now cast an ominous shadow over David's every waking moment. The tendrils of the supernatural had woven themselves into the fabric of his reality, and the boundaries between the tangible and the ethereal began to disintegrate. Obsession seized David, a relentless grip that tightened with each passing day. The headset became an extension of his very being, a conduit through which he navigated the labyrinth of his tormented consciousness. Reality and the supernatural merged into a surreal tapestry, where the ordinary and the spectral coexisted in an unsettling dance. Strange occurrences bled into David's daily life with alarming regularity. Shadows that seemed to linger a moment too long, whispers that echoed through empty corridors, and glimpses of apparitions that vanished as swiftly as they appeared. His perception, once anchored in the concrete realm, now wavered between the living and the dead. In his sleep-deprived state, David's grasp on reality slipped like sand through clenched fists. Sleep became a fragile respite haunted by visions of Sarah, her eyes reflecting the depths of an abyss he dared not explore. The once familiar contours of his surroundings became distorted, as if he walked a parallel plane where the laws of the living held no sway. Dread clung to him like a second skin, and the once subtle boundary between his nightmares and waking hours blurred into an indistinct haze. David, unable to distinguish the whispers of the RAS-induced encounters from the murmurs of the mundane, teetered on the precipice of a fractured psyche. As the supernatural encroached upon his daily reality, David found solace slipping away, replaced by a haunting awareness that the technology he had embraced harbored a darker secret. The consequences of his actions manifested in the spectral symphony that surrounded him, an eerie overture that crescendoed with every desperate attempt to bridge the gap between worlds. Questions clawed at David's mind like ethereal specters. What was the true nature of the RAS technology? Was it a bridge to the afterlife, or a gateway to the shadows that dwelled within the recesses of his own consciousness? The once certain path to communion with the deceased had become a labyrinth of uncertainty, and David grappled with the chilling realization that he might be teetering on the edge of a precipice from which there was no return. The mysteries that unfolded threatened to unravel the very fabric of his sanity, and David stood at the crossroads of a haunting enigma, one that held the key to both his salvation and his descent into the abyss. Chapter 5, Haunting Manifestations. The room, bathed in an otherworldly glow, bore witness to the convergence of worlds as David, ensnared by the RAS technology, unwittingly invited the deceased into the realms of the living. The air thickened with an electric charge, and the boundaries that demarcated the tangible from the spectral began to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. Eerie manifestations emerged from the shadows, cloaked in the shroud of the unknown. As the RAS technology pulsed with spectral energy, apparitions of the deceased materialized before David's eyes, ethereal echoes of those who had crossed the threshold into the afterlife. Their forms, once familiar, now took on an unsettling translucence that sent shivers down David's spine. The room echoed with disembodied whispers, a cacophony of voices that wove a haunting symphony around him. Faces long lost to the corridors of time stared back at him, their eyes windows into a realm beyond mortal comprehension. Sarah, with eyes that reflected the abyss, stood among them, a specter caught between the living and the dead. Terrifying encounters unfolded with each pulse of the RAS technology. Cold fingers brushed against David's skin, leaving an imprint of spectral chill. Shadows, once benign, contorted into grotesque shapes that danced in macabre delight. The room itself seemed to breathe with a life of its own, responding to the supernatural forces unleashed by the unwitting experiment. David, caught in the crossfire of the living and the dead, struggled to maintain his tenuous grip on sanity. Every step he took was haunted by phantoms that seemed to mock the fragility of his existence. Reality became a shifting tapestry, where the line between the tangible and the supernatural became increasingly indistinct. The manifestations intensified, challenging the very fabric of David's reality. The spectral echoes whispered secrets, truths buried in the recesses of his subconscious, and half-forgotten nightmares resurfaced with a vengeance. Sleep, once a refuge, became a theater of horrors where the deceased and the living engaged in a spectral dance of unresolved emotions. The RAS technology, a conduit to communion, had become a gateway to a realm of unbridled terror. The echoes of the deceased, once gentle whispers, now reverberated with the chilling resonance of the unknown. David, trapped in a nightmare that transcended the boundaries of both waking and dreaming, questioned the very nature of his reality. As the haunting manifestations unfolded, David found himself teetering on the precipice of a descent into madness. The line between the real and the supernatural had all but vanished, leaving him entangled in a spectral web that threatened to consume the remnants of his sanity. The experiment, once driven by desperate hope, had become a harrowing journey into the heart of an enigma that held the power to reshape not only his perception of reality but the very essence of his existence. Chapter 6, The Unveiling. In the dim glow of the RAS technology, David's world crumbled like ancient parchment, revealing the sinister underbelly of the experiment that had promised communion with the deceased. Dr. Hartley, the harbinger of forbidden knowledge, stood before him, eyes ablaze with a fervor that transcended the boundaries of scientific curiosity. As the veil of secrecy was torn asunder, David learned of the technology's genesis, an unholy union between cutting-edge science and arcane rituals, a sinister pact that sought to breach the very fabric of the afterlife. The RAS, once a bridge to the deceased, now bore the fingerprints of forces beyond mortal comprehension. The dark secret unfurled like a malevolent tapestry, a pact forged with entities that lurked in the shadows of the afterlife, beings hungry for the souls of the living. The technology, a conduit not only for communion but for the extraction of spiritual essence, lay at the heart of a ritual that defied the natural order. For David, the consequences of meddling with the veil between worlds became painfully apparent. The manifestations that haunted him were not echoes of the deceased but conduits through which otherworldly entities sought passage. The RAS technology, a beacon that beckoned the spectral, had unleashed forces that defied control, transcending the boundaries of both science and the supernatural. As David grappled with the revelation, a maelstrom of spiritual energies spiraled out of control. The room pulsated with an otherworldly energy, and the air crackled with the fury of entities eager to breach the threshold into the realm of the living. Shadows coalesced into grotesque forms, and whispers evolved into guttural chants that echoed through the chamber. Dr. Hartley, her veneer of scientific curiosity stripped away, revealed herself as a puppet in the hands of malevolent forces. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural fervor as she chanted incantations that reverberated through the interstice between the worlds. The very fabric of reality strained under the weight of forbidden knowledge and supernatural incursion. Forces beyond David's control were unleashed in a crescendo of horror. The room became a battleground between the living and the spectral, a theater where the consequences of meddling with the afterlife played out in an apocalyptic spectacle. Reality warped and twisted, as if the laws of the universe were rewritten in the ink of forbidden knowledge. In the gripping climax, David found himself at the epicenter of a cosmic struggle, an unwitting participant in a dark ritual that threatened to plunge both the living and the dead into the abyss. The RAS technology, once a lifeline, had become a conduit for an impending cataclysm that transcended the boundaries of mortal comprehension. As the forces unleashed spiraled towards an inevitable climax, David stood on the precipice of a choice that would shape the fate of both worlds. The sinister origins of the RAS technology had been unveiled, and the consequences of meddling with the veil between worlds had become an inescapable reality. The stage was set for a battle that would determine whether the living and the dead could coexist or if they would be condemned to the eternal abyss that yawned open before them. Chapter 7, Confrontation and Resolution. The once silent chamber reverberated with an eerie resonance, a symphony of forces colliding in a crescendo of supernatural chaos. Dr. Hartley, now a conduit for malevolent entities, chanted incantations that echoed through the very fabric of reality. David, standing at the epicenter of the maelstrom, braced himself for a confrontation with the malevolent force that lurked behind the RAS technology. As the incantations reached a fever pitch, shadows coalesced into a monstrous form, a manifestation of the malevolent force that sought passage into the realm of the living. Eyes that glowed with an infernal light fixated on David, and the air crackled with a palpable malevolence. The room, once a sanctuary of scientific exploration, now mirrored a gateway to the abyss. Horrors intensified as the malevolent force unleashed spectral entities that danced in macabre delight. David, caught in the crossfire between the living and the supernatural, felt the weight of unseen hands clawing at the edges of his sanity. The very air became charged with an oppressive energy, a reminder that the consequences of meddling with the veil between worlds were far more terrifying than he could have fathomed. With each step closer to the heart of the maelstrom, David's resolve wavered. His mind, a battleground between reason and supernatural influence, teetered on the brink of surrender. The horrors intensified, pushing him to the limits of his endurance. Spectral whispers taunted him, and nightmarish visions clawed at the edges of his consciousness. Yet, in the face of the encroaching darkness, a flicker of defiance ignited within David. The specter of Sarah, a beacon in the shadows, beckoned him forward. With newfound determination, he confronted the monstrous force that lurked behind the RAS technology. A battle unfolded on both physical and metaphysical planes, a struggle that transcended the limitations of mortal perception. The resolution, however, defied the conventions of a neat conclusion. As David confronted the malevolent force, the boundary between victory and defeat blurred into an enigmatic haze. The malevolent force, though momentarily repelled, left behind an imprint and uncertainty that lingered like a phantom echo. The chamber, once a battleground, fell into an eerie stillness. Dr. Hartley, freed from the grip of supernatural influence, stared into the abyss of her actions. The RAS technology, its malevolent origins unveiled, pulsed with an uncertain energy. David, standing at the nexus of the supernatural and the mortal, grappled with the aftermath of a battle that defied explanation. The resolution left room for interpretation, an ambiguity that echoed the uncertainty of the supernatural. The malevolent force, though seemingly defeated, left a lingering question mark, an invitation for readers to ponder the boundaries between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. As the dust settled, the chamber held the echoes of a confrontation that transcended the pages of the narrative, inviting readers to question the very fabric of reality and the consequences of delving into the forbidden realms of the supernatural. Conclusion: the lingering shadows. As the last echoes of the supernatural skirmish faded, the chamber, once a battleground of malevolent forces, sank into an uneasy silence. David, his gaze haunted by the specters of the unknown, stood amidst the remnants of a struggle that defied the laws of both the living and the dead. The air clung to the residue of spectral energies, a subtle reminder that the veil between worlds was thin and permeable. The RAS technology, its once sleek surface now etched with the scars of a metaphysical battle, pulsed with an eerie resonance, a testament to the forbidden knowledge it harbored. Dr. Hartley, released from the grip of otherworldly influence, faced the aftermath with eyes that mirrored the uncertainty etched into the very fabric of reality. The malevolent force, though seemingly repelled, left behind a disquieting ambivalence, a whisper that lingered in the shadows, waiting to be heard in the stillness of the night. As the narrative descended into an enigmatic abyss, the chamber became a metaphorical crossroads, a junction where the living and the dead converged, and the line between the known and the supernatural dissolved. The resolution, bathed in ambiguity, invited readers to question the very nature of reality and the consequences of unraveling the mysteries that dwelled in the spectral interstice. Outside the narrative's confines, the readers were left with a lingering unease, a shiver that traced the contours of the unknown. The story, like a ghostly apparition, hovered at the periphery of their thoughts, inviting them to consider the fragility of the boundaries between the tangible and the ethereal. In the stillness that followed, as shadows danced in the corners of perception, the narrative's conclusion whispered of lingering mysteries and spectral imprints that defied conventional understanding. The tale had ended, yet the echoes of the supernatural lingered, an unsettling reminder that, in the realm of the unknown, some mysteries were destined to remain entangled in the shadows, forever elusive and forever haunting.